On the news, Nigeria's debt profile hits $102 billion as federal government allocates 3.36 trillion naira for fuel subsidy in 2023. No agreement with Cameroon on dam construction, federal government clarifies. And President Muhammadu Buhari signs Nigerian Set-Up Bill into law. Glad to have you join us on News Now. I am Mary Kanu. The federal government says 3.36 trillion naira has been allocated for fuel subsidy in 2023 as Nigeria's debt profile hits $102 billion. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, who made this known on Wednesday in Abuja, also said the 2023 budget proposal has a budget deficit of 10.78 trillion naira. She said this will be funded through domestic and multilateral borrowings and proceeds from privatization. According to her, of Nigeria's $102 billion debt, 35% is foreign and 65% is domestic, while the current public debt is at 23% of the country's gross domestic product. The minister also said the 2023 budget also factored in 17.16% inflation. Well, to discuss this further, Segun Sukwiton, financial expert, joins me now. Thank you very much for joining me. Now, with Nigeria's debt profile as high as $102 billion, where does this place the economy in terms of recovery?
Thanks for having me. Good evening, Nigerians. Yeah. Basically, I think it's very clear that this puts us in very dire straits. Especially when you look at the debt service implications of this relative to the revenue profile of the government. And this has always been the issue. The debt itself, technically speaking, is not a problem. People owe, economies owe, and the federal government will still argue with you that our debt to GDP ratio is still very healthy, and it's true. But our GDP, the structure of our economy is such that our GDP does not translate to the levels of revenues that it should for the government as a result of all sorts of things, including, tax evasion, poor tax administration processes on the part of the government. Because of that, we must not look at the debt to GDP ratio. We must look at the debt to revenue ratio, or the debt service to revenue ratio, and that ratio is well over 100% now, and that's very, very alarming. In other words, for a layman, Nigeria, the federal government of Nigeria is earning less than it has to pay to the debtors, to the creditors of the country, and that's a big problem. Which is, of course, if you then step backwards, you say, why is this happening? Everybody knows the stories that we've been hearing in the last 2 weeks. We've been regaled with stories of oil theft. I mean, our OPEC quota is 1.8 million barrels per day. Nigeria, as at the last report, was producing less than 1 million barrels per day. So you can just do the math. We're losing half of our revenue potential, which means if the government is able to fix that problem, given the price of oil, in the international marketplace, we may not have needed to borrow this much. But as it were, it's very unfortunate that we're in a very difficult situation.
Now, if you can hear me, I must ask, the argument for or against fuel subsidy is a very dicey one. But with an allocation of 3.36 trillion naira for fuel subsidy in 2023, what do you think the recovery pattern would look like by the time fuel subsidy is finally removed? Now, should we expect hyperinflation?
Well, I mean, yeah, if you remove the subsidy on petrol in particular, the multiplier effect as far as inflation is concerned is best imagined. The government dares not. There's a reason that successive governments have struggled to remove these subsidies and have not done so. Because, the economy is so inefficient that everybody relies on PMS, power supply is terrible. There are no alternative energy sources. So everybody depends on petrol, kerosene, and diesel. And petrol being the major component. Once you take out that subsidy, it creates, just like you said, a situation of hyperinflation. People have said the subsidies must go, and I agree. The subsidies have to go, but they cannot go until the federal government fixes the fundamental issues. So, for example, 3.6 trillion naira has been allocated to fuel subsidies. You have debt service obligations running at about 4 trillion naira as well. What am I saying? 6 trillion naira. And the federal government's share of revenues is about 5 trillion naira. So if, for example, the federal government fixes the oil theft issue, then you have enough revenues to take care of our debt service obligations and things like fuel subsidy that cannot go yet. You also have to talk about local refining capacity. Those are issues that the federal government have to fix. You have to talk about alternative strategies for funding the activities of the government, especially the capital component. Must we borrow to finance all our capital projects? There are so many other ways of attracting private capital to fund the budget. What is the government doing about this? So before you start talking about fuel subsidy removal, you really, really have to look at a lot of the other issues.
Can you hear me, Mr. Shokito? I'm afraid that's how much we can take on the news. But thank you so much for joining us, Segun Shokito, financial expert. Thank you very much for your contribution. Moving on now, Minister of Water Resources Suleiman Adamu has debunked reports that Nigeria entered into an agreement with Cameroon to build a dam that will mitigate flooding when water from the Lagdo Dam is released. The minister made the remarks in Abuja during the Budget Defense Welfare Senate Committee on Water Resources. He said there is no record of such an agreement, but while the government is in the process of building the Dazen Dam to mitigate flooding from Cameroon's Lagdo Dam, there are engineering concerns. Adamu said Cameroon did not inform Nigeria about the release of water from the Lagdo Dam until 24 hours after it was released, adding that the Lagdo Dam contributes only 1% to the flooding in Nigeria. He, however, maintained that 80% of the floods in parts of Nigeria are as a result of ceaseless rainfalls. And President Muhammadu Buhari has signed into law the Nigeria Startups Bill, under which the government is to set up 10 billion naira investment fund for young innovators and also make provision for incentives and tax holidays to encourage local innovators. The Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Issa Pantami, who spoke with newsmen on Wednesday shortly after the act was signed by President Buhari at the State House Abuja, said the bill seeks to create and develop an enabling environment for technology-enabled startups in the country. He also added that startups can also access a special seed fund created under the law, which will provide labeled startups with finance and also provide relief to technology laboratories, accelerators, incubators, and hubs.
This bill is an executive bill, meaning the federal government of Nigeria under President Muhammadu Buhari initiated the bill through the collaboration of the Ministry of Communications and Digital Economy on one hand and the Office of the Chief of Staff to Mr. President on the other. These two offices coordinated and established the foundation for the Nigeria Startup Act 2022. And the approach we adopted was to allow our young startups, our young innovators all over the country to identify the challenges they were being confronted with when it comes to intellectual property, financing, regulation, incentive, among many others. That is the organic approach, meaning bottom-up approach. So young innovators were engaged in each and every geopolitical zone of Nigeria where we engage them to voice out their challenges when it comes to enabling environment for business. The minimum at the start, based on the provision of the law, is 10 billion naira. That is the minimum amount. However, in the bill, there is a provision that Bank of Industry, Central Bank of Nigeria, National Information Technology Development Fund, among many others, can also be accommodated.
We'll take a break here, but still to come, cholera vaccine shortage forces move to one-dose strategy, World Health Organization announces. We'll bring you details of the story and more right after this break.
Opinions are free, facts are sacred, but truth is universal.
How, in practical terms, can we, for instance, de-escalate the tension?
President must see himself as the President of the Federal Republic.
We know where the enemy is. 3 places. The Lake Chad Basin, the border area between Nigeria and Cameroon, and then the Sambisa Forest.
On TV360, we give you a complete dose of everything. Opinion, facts, and undiluted truth.
I hardly believe what politicians are saying in this part of the world.
A new Nigeria is possible, a future is possible.
We delve into the issues, dissect it so that you can understand it, use it to take action.
I don't think there's any need for any governor to look for grant for ranching.
TV360, dissecting the issues.
Welcome back. A recap now of some of our top stories tonight. The federal government says 3.36 trillion naira has been allocated for fuel subsidy in 2023 as Nigeria's debt profile hit $102 billion. The Minister of Finance, Zainab Ahmed, who made this known on Wednesday in Abuja, also said the 2023 budget proposal has a budget deficit of 10.78 trillion naira. She said this will be funded through domestic and multilateral borrowings and proceeds from privatization. We also told you that President Muhammadu Buhari has signed into law the Nigeria Startups Bill, under which government is to set up 10 billion naira investment fund for young innovators and also make provision for incentives and tax holidays to encourage local innovators. The Minister of Communication and Digital Economy, Issa Pantami, who spoke with newsmen on Wednesday shortly after the act was signed by President Buhari at the State House Abuja, explained that the bill seeks to create and develop an enabling environment for technology-enabled startups in the country. Well, in case you missed any of our news bulletins or for more updates, do log on to our website on www.tv360nigeria.com. You can also follow us on our social media platforms on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Google Plus at TV360 Nigeria. On Facebook, we're at TV360 Online. And now to COVID-19 stories. It reports that a 16-year-old girl has died in a COVID quarantine center after pleas from her family for medical help were ignored has caused anger in China. The distressing footage shows a teenager ill, struggling to breathe, and convulsing in a bunk bed at what appears to be a quarantine center in Ruzhou, Henan province. The girl's aunt said 6 members of her family were quarantined and that her niece was not sick when she first arrived, adding that the family had been asking for medical help but none came for days, and calls to official phone lines went unanswered. During protracted lockdowns in some regions, there have been repeated cases of people being denied medical care by overzealous officials because of rigid rules requiring negative tests to enter hospitals. An oversight report has revealed that COVID-19 contributed to a quarter of all U.S. maternal deaths last year and in 2020. The report released Wednesday morning by the U.S. Government Accountability Office showed that COVID-19 contributed to roughly 25% of the more than 2,000 maternal deaths in the 2 years combined. Out of last year's 1,178 reported maternal deaths, COVID-19 contributed to 401 according to the report. In 2020, the virus was behind almost 12% of maternal deaths. According to the Center for Disease Control, maternal deaths saw a sharp rise while disparities widened during the pandemic. We'll take another break and return with business updates, so stay with us. Welcome back. Simisala Adigo now joins us with the latest business updates. Simisala, over to you.
Thank you, Mary. Welcome to Business News. In commemoration of its 50th annual general meeting, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, MAN, has organized the second Adiola Odutola lecture. The event, which was held in Lagos on Tuesday, aims to set the agenda for industrialization in Nigeria in the next decade. They lamented the challenges bedeviling manufacturers in the country, urging the federal government to find a lasting solution to the issues. Our correspondent has the details in this next report. Efforts at industrializing Nigeria through manufacturing are yet to yield desired results, owing to challenges ranging from insecurity, limited infrastructure, shortage of forex, and policy inconsistency, among others. These challenges have contributed to the sector's underwhelming performance. At this meeting, manufacturers expressed concern over the sector's dwindling performance and its implication on the economy as poverty and unemployment continue to rise.
The country's dwindling industrial performance has significant socio-economic implications as poverty and unemployment continues to rise. While there is a pressing need to create more jobs, the high cost of doing business in the face of declining consumer purchasing power puts enormous strain on manufacturers. Any journey towards industrialization must place strong emphasis on creating an enabling environment for manufacturing.
They maintained that for Nigeria to achieve its agenda for industrialization in the next decade, it is necessary for the government to formulate policies that will enhance and sustain industrialization to facilitate enduring economic growth.
Nigeria needs to henceforth intensify efforts at promoting industrialization with specific focus on attainment of the following targets in the next 10 years. 15% manufacturing sector growth, 20% manufacturing contributions to GDP, 15% growth in export of manufactured products, 10% increase in share of manufacturing to total export merchandise, stronger inter-industry linkages between SMEs and large corporations, improved manufacturing contributions to government tax revenue, and 20% increase in manufacturing employment.
The Federal Ministry of Trade and Investment commended the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria for being a dependable ally to the government and assured of its continuous work towards achieving the National Development Plan.
The Federal Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment is a willing partner in ensuring the necessary enabling environment that will further stimulate industrialization, accelerate domestic and foreign direct investment, as well as ensure that a coordinated and integrated approach to Nigerian trade and industrial policy is entrenched.
In our engagement, he has promised that we should bring the outcome of this lecture to him so that all those recommendations that can be implemented, especially the low-hanging fruits, even within the stretch of the little stretch of time that he has before his administration is concluded, we will be able to see how those recommendations could be implemented. So we have an access to government that will allow us to take all the key recommendations to him with a view to getting government to implement them.
The blueprint for accelerated development of manufacturing in Nigeria was unveiled, and plaques were also presented to individuals and companies in recognition for their contribution to the sector. Simisola Digun, TV360, Lagos. Well, we'll now go on a short break and be back with Stock Market Report. The bearish trend on the Nigerian Stock Exchange continued on Wednesday as most counters failed to drive demand on the bourse. The market dipped by 2.31% at the close of trading session. This negative push also drove the oil share index down to 44,318 points and market cap to 24 trillion naira. Airtel Africa and MRS Oil Nigeria led the laggards with a combined 1,325 naira loss. On the gainers counter, Fidelity Bank PLC and Jais Bank PLC topped the list with a combined loss of 4 naira 74 kobo. In 183 deals, investors exchanged 165 million volume of shares valued at over 3 billion naira. Now, global stock markets were mixed on Wednesday after Wall Street rose on strong corporate profit reports. So our select global stocks, the UK's FTSE and US Dow Jones, are in the bears, while for the Japan's index Nikkei, gains in the power, precision instruments and electrical/machinery sectors led shares higher to 0.37%. That's all on Stock Market Report. Back to you, Mary.
Well, Simisola, many thanks for the update. We move over now to the global scene. A shortage of cholera vaccines has forced a temporary shift to a one-dose strategy from the usual two in campaigns to fight a swelling number of outbreaks across the world. Director General of the World Health Organization, Tedros Ghebreyesus, made this known during a media briefing on global health issues on Wednesday. He explained that the strained global supply of cholera vaccines had pushed the International Coordinating Group, which manages emergency supplies of vaccines, to suspend the two-dose regimen, adding that 29 countries had reported cholera cases so far this year, including Haiti, Syria, and Malawi.
Around the world, 29 countries have reported outbreaks this year, including 13 countries that did not have outbreaks last year. Cholera is highly dangerous and can kill within a day, but it can be prevented with 2 doses of safe and effective oral vaccines. Since 2013, WHO, UNICEF, Medicine Sans Frontières, and the International Federation of the Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies have jointly managed a global stockpile of cholera vaccines to help control epidemics. However, the current wave of outbreaks is putting unprecedented pressure on the stockpile. As a result, the 4 agencies have decided to suspend the 2-dose strategy in favor of a 1-dose strategy so that more people receive some protection from limited stocks. The 1-dose strategy has proven effective in previous outbreaks, although evidence on how long protection lasts is limited. However, this is clearly less than ideal, and rationing must only be a temporary solution. In the long term, we need a plan to scale up vaccine production as part of a holistic strategy to prevent and stop cholera outbreaks. In addition, the best way to prevent cholera outbreaks is to ensure people have access to safe water and sanitation.
And now in sports, physically challenged athletes have staged protests in Lagos over the alleged exclusion from the forthcoming 2022 National Sports Festival in Delta State, scheduled to hold from November 28 to December 10, 2022. The para athletes who blocked the Ojuelegbe access in Lagos carried placards conveying their grievances and called on the Sports Minister Sunday Dare not to exclude them from the biennial festival. Well, this next report has more details. The Surulere area of Lagos State on Wednesday witnessed an influx of physically challenged athletes, causing traffic gridlock that kept motorists on the road for hours. The athletes gathered not for a celebration, but to air their displeasure at the alleged exclusion of some para sports like swimming and tennis from the forthcoming National Sports Festival held biennially. What started as a peaceful protest degenerated into scenes where tempos rising, exchange of blows and scuffles. Some of the athletes say the protest was necessary as members of the PWD group were being marginalized due to their disabilities.
This thing has been happening. I thought to be stopped. Why? Most of us are graduates. But if you carry your certificate now to any government office, like they will not take you. Some people look you somehow. Now we decided to continue to this sport. We are the one going to different country, bring medal to this country.
As we await the list of sports to be included in the National Sports Festival, and when the list is out, we find out that some special sports are not involved, and there are no specific reason why those sports will not be part of the sports festival.
We are here because they feel cheated. They feel like they've taken their main source, their own livelihood away from them. And this has become a pattern. This is not the first time. They can't be doing this when these people have trained for the past 2 years, only at the last minute for you to come and say you don't have enough budget to cater for them. That's not human.
The athletes also accused the federal government of inviting athletes living with disability from other African countries to participate in the National Sports Festival.
We suddenly just received a letter that remove like 4 sports in our festival. Number 1, tennis, which basketball, para swimming, and all games. So then I say all the games that they remove, they went to outside countries, go and bring another country to come and replace our game. For what?
I don't know the reason why the game will be removed out of the festival, because the game is already been there before. It's not that it's something that is just want to put in now. The game is there before. So please, we are pleading. We are not a tout. We don't want to be a beggar. Please, those people that is top here, that we need your help so that the minister can include our game back.
Addressing the protesters, a representative of the federal government, while debunking reports of the withdrawal of the athletes, said the exclusion was to keep them fit for their upcoming Para Games.
You have your games already, which I'm sure they were going to be an annual event. So if you did yours in April, this is the one they are doing now in Asaba, and maybe you do your own next year. So I don't, for Asaba to say no and the ministry is working, actually ministry is working on your letter. But I want you to debunk the fact that you've been withdrawn for no reason.
At the last edition of the National Sports Festival, all para sports were included in the competition. Mary Kanu, TV360, Nigeria. Well, on that note, we call it a wrap on the news this evening. Many thanks for staying with us. I am Mary Kanu. Bye for now.